welcome back to Getting to the Top, the podcast where we interview transformational leaders about their leadership journey in hopes that we can either inspire those of you on your leadership journey to shoot for bigger and more transformational change within your organizations, or if you are a non-traditional leader, that you are supported on your journey and you realize the need for diversity at the very top of all of our organizations in search of a better world. Today, I have with me someone I greatly admire, Dale Nirvani Pfeifer, who is running an organization and doing amazing things and great work. And so I'm going to ask Dale, please introduce yourself.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for having me on. As Racquel said, my name is Dale Pfeifer, and I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Goodworld. So at Goodworld, we have a social impact platform that we offer to thousands of nonprofits to do their fundraising and community management, and we give that to nonprofits for free. And we also have a corporate social responsibility platform that we do things like workplace giving, volunteering, we do social impact rewards and recognition, employee engagement. And we have this bigger goal to really ignite the next generation of philanthropy through bringing together nonprofits, businesses, and individuals who really want to do good together in a very creative way that multiplies their impact. So that's what I spend my time doing. I'm a New Zealand native, as you'll hear from my funny accent. But yeah, just really passionate about doing good in the world.
Wonderful. So what inspired you to create this?
So, you know, it was really interesting. I arrived in the US in 2008. And, you know, I was living in New York City and I was working for a nonprofit. And the nonprofit that I was working for was raising money so differently than the way that my friends were giving money when we were out and about going to charity events in New York City. And I realized that there was a gap, and it was very much a generational gap. And it was also a gap in like resources and time that nonprofit executives had to spend kind of going around and figuring out how to connect with younger donors and really bring them into the organization in a way that's impactful for them. So I just had this light bulb go off in my head one day. Technology would be the answer. And so that's when I decided to go about creating a company called Goodworld. And our first product was a social media donations product. So we developed hashtag donations, which was an instant way to give on Instagram, Twitter, and the web. And Facebook, sorry. So Facebook, you just write hashtag donate and a dollar amount and you would make a donation. On Twitter, you simply would retweet. And we would go around at the start, people going hashtag, you know, help, whatever. And we would tag people and they would simply be able to retweet and make a donation. And then, of course, you know, the product kind of evolved from there. You know, our customers were saying to us, look, we love social media donations and we think it's really important, but we also need to serve other donors, the whole range of donors. And so we build out really innovative events and auction technology, crowdfunding. We were the first mover in the donate your spare change space. And then later on, Mastercard came on as our major investor and ended up taking us into the corporate social responsibility route so we could really supercharge that support that nonprofits have. And that's just been also a wonderful journey working with some of the biggest financial services companies in the world to really help them understand how they can make a difference through their philanthropic dollars.
Fabulous. So you have this big idea. I normally go from like how you started to how you got here, but this time I think I might go from where you are now back to how you started. So tell me about how, you know, when you started this amazing idea. It's 2008, we're facing a financial crisis. You know, wasn't that terrifying? Was it an instant success, or did you have to sort of build to it? Did you have to continue? What was that process like at the start of Goodworld?
Oh my gosh, it was the real entrepreneurial roller coaster. I could tell you a lot of stories, but I went through a couple of career iterations, I guess, since through actually the platform. First of all, we started providing services and talking to people, and then to kind of be able to get the money to actually invest in building the technology. And I think some days, I was just writing to one of my friends who's a founder as well, and I think even from day to day, week to week, can be like, black and white, night and day as a founder. I remember like going from within 6 months to incredible success, pitching President Obama, being invited to number 10 Downing Street to talk to David Cameron's people about disaster relief. Venture capitalists calling and wanting to invest so much money in my company to, like 9 months later, and, things had really, really changed, and having to lay people off for the first time, which was just one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. Yeah. And just realizing, like I learned, like we didn't quite have product market fit. Like you think you have an idea, and all of a sudden all this attention is coming onto, and you're like, yes, let's put our foot down and go for it. And then all of a sudden the business model or the strategy, or with the market, like how you're going to market, and marketing, things like that, just getting a little piece wrong can put the whole thing at risk. And as somebody who's taken on venture capital, and as somebody who has fiscal responsibility for the organization, the whole organization, staff, investors, everybody, you have to sometimes make those really hard decisions, because it's no point, even from an employee's perspective, having them come in every day and asking them to achieve results when you're not pointing them at the right thing, and you're still not sure what the right thing actually really is.
Yeah. So how do you learn that in the process? So you're riding this bicycle while you're building it. How are you learning? What are the things that you need to tweak and change, and how are you doing that in the moment of running this business?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think sometimes you learn from the hardest way, which is the pain. I think one of the most important things, and something that I've been so blessed in, is just to have incredible advisors and people around me. I mean, we have some phenomenal investors as well. And, Goodworld is as hard as a social enterprise. That's why we exist, to do good in the world and also to make money. And I think we have very self-selecting people because of that. And so even though a lot of our investors, they're investors, right? That's their mandate. They also really got behind us and helped us. Introductions, relationships, guidance on strategy, talking to other founders, like what did they do? That was a real, like, one of my investors has this fantastic a conference, and really builds relationships and connections between founders, which is so valuable, because you can go and talk to somebody who was in your situation like 6 months ago. And I think the other thing that we've been so lucky with is Mastercard being our major investor. I mean, they are a really incredible company. They tie, a part of how they tie executive compensation back to is actually results in this type of thing, and corporate social responsibility, and, environmental goals. And so, having them as a deep strategic partner enabled us to have a bit more leeway to actually play in a sandbox. But, that relationship took over a year to build before we even launched our first project with them. So sometimes you've just got to follow your instinct and take the risk and just keep showing up. So those are some of the things that really helped.
So tell me about your career leading up to Goodworld. So you're working for a nonprofit. So what was your first job? What did you start out doing, and then how did you get into philanthropy?
So I'm a recovering academic. My first career was in academics, and I actually researched and taught leadership. And it was, that to me was just, it was such an incredible experience to be able to do that, and also to have that time for a period of deep learning and also self-reflection as I kind of stood up, tried to stand up with shaky legs as a leader myself. I took a leadership course. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my career, and I ended up taking a postgraduate course in leadership, and it just set something off in my mind. You know, sometimes when you just feel a fire inside you and like, this is it, I have to move forward with this. And so I was sort of, and I remember I did as one of my assignments, you had to go out and interview some leaders. So I was and this was in Auckland, New Zealand, where I was living at the time. And I was very fortunate to interview a guy called Sir Paul Reeves. Okay. Now, he is an incredible, just an amazing leader. He's a Maori. He's a leader of his tribe. He's Maori, which is an Indigenous New Zealander. He was a leader of a pan-tribal movement for economic prosperity amongst Maori, which is called the Hui Taumata. And, you know, he was like the archbishop of the church in New Zealand. And, you know, he was a business leader. So he was just so multifaceted. And I remember going in and speaking to him and asking him about leadership, because I was so really interested in understanding what made a good leader in New Zealand and what made us unique as leaders, and what I could find out about that so I could be of service to leaders. I didn't really see myself so much in a leadership role at that time. And he started saying to me, well, what kind of leadership? Are you talking about leadership in the Western sense, you know, with, you know, white New Zealanders, or are you talking about leadership in the Maori world? And that just like blew my mind about how leadership was so different. And it really opened up, you know, it really took the blinkers off into a real different way of being and leading. And still and that's actually what I ended up researching that. I did my master's thesis on that, which ended up being pretty much a PhD thesis by the end of it. It took me 2.5 years, and I just learned so much. I was lucky enough to use a framework from Thunderbird University in Arizona called the Globe, which studied like culture and how culture reflects in leadership and how it's similar and different. And you know, I published this research, and then you know, it was I just you know, and I think like for me, I learned so much as a white woman stepping into that world and what is really inappropriate about that, but also what is, you know, I learned that, you know, it's really hard for somebody who wasn't Maori to kind of really see and be able to reflect these things. And maybe it wasn't even my role to do that. But then there was another group of people who were more in the Maori business world who were like Sir Paul, who was like, this is really important work that needs to be done. We need a model of leadership for New Zealand, and we need to have a common ground to be able to talk about that from. So it was just this incredible growth that I ended up running the Centre for the Study of Leadership at Victoria University. Wow. And we had a whole program on leadership in New Zealand, and then ended up working on a concept called allophilia, which means to like or love the other. And so with that, we looked at leadership in society in quite different diverse groups and how they had come together. And what we realized was that the main thing that bound these groups together was the ability to like or love each other.
Oh, wow.
And we broke that down into 18 dimensions. And you were fortunate enough to work with Todd Patinsky, who was an associate professor at the Center for Public Leadership at the Kennedy School at the time, and David Gergen, who was running the Center for Public Leadership, and looked at the Maori tribes and how they had come together, through different things, a political party, at the formation of a television station, and this hui taumata, which was this economic development movement. So, that's what I did. And it was really interesting for me. And I'll stop talking in a second, but it was really interesting for me because at that stage in my career, I was so head orientated. I was trying to understand these structures, these systems, and my head was buzzing, and I was almost like going a little bit crazy because my mind was just on overdrive. And it was also at that time that I learned meditation, and it was doing a lot more self-reflection and things like that. And I posed myself this question: should I follow my head and stay in academia, or should I follow my heart and go out into the world and really create some action out into the world and try and stand as a leader on my own 2 feet? And after a lot of reflection and that sort of thing, I decided to follow my heart, and ended up moving over to New York City and founded Goodworld.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So, and how does that, I want to ask you 2 different things. One, how does that whole concept of elophilia factor into your leadership? Like, do you lead more with your head, or do you lead more with your heart, or are you leading from some other perspective now? And then I think the other thing that I'd want to know is, you've mentioned all of these amazing people. What's the best advice that you've gotten on this journey?
Yeah, 2 great questions. So I think, I think the lessons about elophilia will always be with me, and that importance of bringing people together in just that right type of way, and in a way, leadership as facilitation of that. But if I think about my leadership style, I think, where I really learned about leadership was in New Zealand, and not just in New Zealand with the New Zealand Maori. And of course, I'm not Maori, but that's where I really ingested so much information. And the word for leadership in Maori is rangatira. And what that means is to weave the people together. So in a leadership context, that's what I see my role as. I see my role as not necessarily being above and in front of the people. I see my role as almost kind of sitting behind the people and holding the space, but then acting as a mouthpiece for the people. And so, it's been interesting being that type of leader in an American business. And, I'm not always like that at all. Like, there are times, absolutely, when you have to make tough decisions, and it's not going to be consensus based. But, I think there's a big role for democratic processes and, meritocracies inside of organizations. So making sure people have the space to bring their thoughts and ideas to the fore, and having a process via which voices can be heard and the top ideas rising to the top, and then really taking those ideas and holding them and positioning them for success.
Yeah, I think it's so important, because a lot of times, we either focus on the pendulum swinging really far to one side or another, and we're like, oh yes, it's all democracy, it's what the people want. And then there are other times where, as a leader, you have to take responsibility and say, I know this is what I think most people want, but I also don't think it's the right decision. And understanding that when the buck stops with you, when you decide, even if you've allowed it to be a democratic decision, you have to own that decision and make sure that whatever the consequences are, you're willing to deal with them on behalf of however that decision came about. So I think it's really important to sort of understand that, listen, there is a place absolutely for democracy, but there are also times when, as a leader, you are expected to lead and take some tough decisions that you can't sort of relinquish to others. All right. So then the best advice that you've been given on this journey?
Yes. Well, oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many good things. And I remember, like, you know, this Mastercard relationship has been so pivotal to us. And I remember we first went into Mastership and we met with one of the wonderful guys that we met with. His name is Prashimik. And he stood there in the corridor and he said to us on the way out, he said, look, we see so many people coming through here, and you know, they come in for a few meetings or whatever, and then, you know, time goes on and we don't see them, we kind of forget about them, and then a project comes up, you know, 6 months later and we don't know where they are anymore, so we get passed on them. So he said, keep showing up. And I think that is like a really, you know, another really wise person in my life used to say, like, showing up is 50% of the battle. And I think that's true. But I would add to that is showing up and leaning in, just taking off Sheryl Sandberg's, you know, body of work there. You know, you have, like, just showing up, even if you don't have the courage to lean in all the way that you would like to, you know, sit at the table, like, be there, you know, just keep coming. And I think another one, another thing that a very wise friend of mine used to say to me was, Dale, we're in a great hurry, so we must move very slowly. And I think that is sometimes like a lot of wisdom in that as well, because you as a leader, it can be super frustrating sometimes. You're like, we just need to be at this place, and, you know, rallying the resources, particularly in a resource constrained environment where people are already so busy. And, you know, and the thing is that we are in a rapidly evolving environment, and sometimes things change really, really quickly. But if you're just out front and you're going, all right, this is the way it is, this is what we're going to do. Might have been different from 2 months ago, but this is, like, you know, you don't take the time to have the conversations, to strategize with people, to understand what these decisions mean to them and really bring them along. You might get them to do it, and but they'll probably leave 6 months later because they're not going to feel respected, they're not going to feel honored, they're not going to feel like, you know, maybe they're burned out. So I think those are two things that I have I think are really sage advice that people have shared with me over the time.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I love both of those. I mean, to keep showing up. It's, don't let them forget you. Don't give them a chance to forget you. I love that. Keep showing up and understanding that it is mostly about perseverance, and just, you know, the person who wins is sometimes the person who just keeps showing up. And it's the, you know, when everyone else has given up, if you are the one that keeps showing up, you're going to be the one who gets through to the other side. And I love this. We're in a hurry. We need to move very slowly. And you know, it's often something that we don't advocate for, moving slowly, because you're just like, oh my gosh, we're in such a rush and there's so many things. And I have in my career made fatally bad decisions as a result of trying to do too much too fast and not taking others along on the journey, and just being so focused on the end point that you're not focused on, once we get there, what will be left, or who will be left, or what shells of souls will be left once we get to the destination, and is it worth it? And how do we instead look at where do we want to be when we get there, or who do we want to be when we get there, and what do we need to do now to make sure that we're all intact on the other side?
Yeah, love that. Totally agree.
Yeah, no. So is Lean In your favorite book? It's one of mine. It's certainly it's absolutely top 10 for me. It's within the top 5. That's a favorite one.
It's a book I really like, and I think it's a great read. Like, it's easy to read, and I like the personal
Fun
stories,
and funny.
and
Yeah.
It is a really great book. I like as well Adam Grant, Give and Take. I think that's an excellent book, and it teaches you how to win by being a giver. I think a lot of us are naturally givers, but there is an art to giving, and you can give and give and give, and you're just going to give everything away, and you're going to end up depleted. But there is a way to give where you can encourage reciprocity, in this book, and which will build you up. So I think that book is a really important book for those of us, and I know there'll be many listening to the podcast who are real natural givers in their hearts.
Yeah, and you always worry about being taken advantage of. So hopefully this can help us to kind of figure out how to lean into being our natural giving selves without feeling like you're being taken advantage of.
That's exactly right. And then there's like one book which I think is like just a great book for leaders. It's kind of like more of a American Man kind of book. I think it's like From Good to Great. That is an excellent book as well. Just if you're stepping up into a leadership role, just some of the kind of the sage advice, like stepping off and, step onto the balcony and look at a problem, from a distance, just some really kind of key strategies that I think are really great for the leaders to put into place and just have in your back pocket.
So with all that you've done, learned, been through, studied, written about, what advice would you give now to a younger Dale? You're looking back, you're saying, Dale, here's what I think you should know.
I would say that, don't always be in such a hurry. I think that's been a big one for me, for a woman who's just been in a hurry to get so much done her whole life. And I would also say that both the head and the heart are important. I think I'm a person that tends to swing from side to side a little bit. And, first of all, I was all about my head in academia. And then I was all about my heart, going out and, being an advocate and working for these, on behalf of all of these causes. But I think like the integration between the head and the heart is so important from so many different perspectives. It's important in your work, it's important in your life. Like if you're out there thinking about your heart and you're not like taking care of yourself, and all of those important ways, like, financially or sleep or that type of stuff. So really trying to create that balance, and it's okay to do that. You don't have to be like 100% one thing and then, or 100% of another. Balance is a key to success. And I think that would have been a really important message to my 18-year-old self.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Dale, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time that you spent with us and all of the wise words and lessons that you shared. And just, I felt like you didn't hold anything back. You shared with us some stuff that you didn't have to. And I really appreciate that, because I think sometimes it's so easy for us to be sort of guarded and not recognize, those aha moments that we have in our lives that can make a really big difference. So thank you so much for that. And so this has been yet another episode of Getting to the Top, where we interview transformational leaders and get the benefit of what they've learned on this journey, and hope that we can all be better leaders and create a more diverse and inclusive world. Thank you so much for joining. If you've not yet subscribed, please subscribe below, and thank you for being with us and spending this time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.